Alright, so with this video, I'm going to go over the group quiz that you guys took, or it was like the Chapter 6 pretest. So for the first three problems, you're referring to this graph. Okay, so you're looking at each equation. So this one is x minus 2y equals negative 3. That's this line right here. And then 4x plus y equals 6 is this line. And stating whether there's no solutions, one solution, or infinitely many solutions. These two lines cross at exactly one point right there. I could even write the point, right? It'd be the point 1, 2. Right, 1, 2 is that point. So you would say there's one solution here. Okay, for number 2, we're looking at, let's erase this. Okay, number 2, looking at y equals negative x, which is this line, and x plus y equals 3, which is this line. Okay, you should be able to tell those lines are parallel, which means they're never going to intersect, so we say there's no solution. And finally, the last two lines, x plus y equals 0 is this line, and y equals negative x is also this line. Okay, it's just another way of writing that equation. So if those two equations represent the same line, then they share all their points, so we say there's infinitely many. Infinitely many solutions. Okay, so you'll have similar questions to this on your test. Alright, moving on to numbers 4 and 5. Okay, for graphing on number 4, the y-intercept starts at 1. Okay, for this equation, the slope is negative 2/3, which means I'm going down 2, and then to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have those 2 points. I can make my line. If I want to be more precise as I continue, I can kind of keep going with the slope. So if I go backwards, it would be this point here. Okay, and I just make my line. You definitely want to use an ID card or something to make a straight edge, or some sort of straight edge so you have a straight line when you do this. Okay, for the second line, the y-intercept is positive 4. So I start my line 1, 2, 3, 4 up here. And then the slope is 1/3. So that means I'm going to go up 1 and then to the right 3, which puts me off the graph. So instead, maybe I want to go backwards. Remember, with our fractions, we can also think of it like this. It's kind of funny, but you know that a negative divided by a negative is still a positive. Right, so this could be another way of thinking about it. So instead of going up and to the right, you can go down, which would be like the negative, and then to the left. So you get to that point. Okay, combine, or sorry, not combine, I draw my line through those points, and I get that the intersection point is that point right there, which would be the point negative 3, 3. Alright, so moving on now to problem 5. Hopefully that kind of clears up some things with graphing. I guess I should note sometimes the slope is just a whole number, like maybe you have y equals 2x minus 1. Okay, the y-intercept, remember, is always the second part, and then the slope, if it's just a whole number, you can think of it as like 2/1. So you would go up 2/1. Okay, and then connect and extend for your line. Okay, just kind of another example so you can see that whole number thing. All right. Now moving on to number 5. Over here, this is using substitution. Okay, this method is, I think, the one students find the most difficult because it seems like there's kind of a lot of steps. The main thing is just to pay attention to your equal signs. Okay, so this equation says that y equals this. Okay, so y can be replaced with that. So sometimes it's not solved for y. Like this equation here, I could have like subtracted 2y from both sides so that I get x by itself. I would have x equals something, and then I could plug that in for x. Okay, so the whole point of substitution is having one variable solved for, and you plug it in the other equation. So here we already have y solved for, so I'm going to plug it in for y. So that means I rewrite this equation. So now I have x plus 2. Instead of y, I'm going to substitute what y is equal to, which is 3x plus 3, and that equals -1. Okay, I'm going to distribute. So I get x plus 6x. The x again was already there. And then distributing the 2, that gives me 6x plus 6. Combining the x's here, I get 7x plus 6 equals -1. Okay, I subtract 6 to both sides. I get 7x equals -7. Divide both sides by 7. I get x equals -1. Remember, your final answer should look like a point, right? So we have the x, I need the y. So I'm going to plug that in to this second equation here. You could plug it into either equation. This one just kind of looks easier to plug into. It's already solved for y, so that could help me out. Okay, so I plug it in for x. Okay, x is just -1, so I plug that in and finish the equation. I multiply, so I get y equals -3 plus 3. And I add, so -3 plus 3 is 0. So my point here is -1 comma 0. Okay, that's the point where these two lines cross. All right. Moving on to numbers 6 and 7. These are the elimination problems. Okay, so the first one, number 6, is a little easier because I don't have to multiply anything. All I have to do, I'm noticing right here that the x's are already the same number but different signs. So they're both 2, but this one's positive and this one's negative, which is exactly what I want because I can just add, and I know that -2x plus 2x is going to be 0, so that cancels out. Okay, then I look to the y. Again, you want to make sure that everything is lined up. Okay, so the x's, the y's, the equal signs, the number, everything needs to be lined up for those, okay? For the y's, I have y plus 3y, so that's going to be 4y. 6 plus 2 gives me 8. Dividing, I get y equals 2. And I can plug that into either equation. So I'll plug it into the first equation, so -2x plus 2 equals 6. I subtract, I get -2x equals 4. And divide by -2. So I get x equals positive divided by negative is going to be a -2. So my point here be -2 comma 2. Okay, so the main idea is I'm looking for what's going to cancel out. I set up like a big addition problem. Make sure the y's are aligned, the equal signs are aligned, the numbers and the x's, okay? And then just solve for the remaining variable, and then plug what you get in to one of your equations to solve for the remaining variable. All right, number 7 is another elimination problem, but you can see that the x's aren't ready to cancel out and the y's aren't ready to cancel out. So what you need to do is multiply. And I think the easiest thing to multiply here is the second equation. Okay, if I multiply it by 2, then excuse me, you'll see that the y parts are going to cancel, right? So if I multiply by 2, that's kind of a good option because I'll end up with 4y in the first equation and then -4y in the second. So those will be ready to cancel out. So that's kind of what I'm thinking to figure out what to multiply by. All right, so I'll rewrite the first equation because I know I'm just going to leave that one because, again, I want that 4y, so I don't need to multiply it by anything. Okay, 6x plus 4y equals 20. And then I rewrite this equation, so 2 times the 4x gives me a positive 8x. 2 times -2y would be -4y. And then 2 times 4 gives me 8. Okay, and I add the second equation. 6x plus 8x gives me 14. 4y and plus negative 4y gives me 0. Okay, they're opposite, so they cancel out. And then 20 plus 8 gives me 28. I divide both sides by 14. I get x equals 2. I have part of the point, right? I need the y now. So I plug it into one of the equations. Let's say I plug it into the first one. So 6 times 2 for x plus 4y equals 20. 6 times 2 is 12. I subtract 12 from both sides and get 4y equals 8. Divide both sides by 4, and I get y equals 2. So I get the point 2 comma 2. Okay, moving on, looking at these word problems. The first one, the key is for you to be able to break this into the equation. So sum, we know that word means plus, so I'm thinking plus. Okay, the sum of two numbers, so I have two things, and they add to, okay, it is 17. Okay, the two things, the two numbers, I don't know what they are, so I can just give them variables. I could say x plus y. Okay. The next part says their difference is 29. Difference means subtracting. Okay, it's what you get when you subtract. So when I subtract two numbers, I get 29. And it's the same two numbers in this problem, right? So I could say x minus y. You could also use like A and B or M and N, whatever your favorite two letters are. Okay, I see that I have y's that are opposites. So if I want to use elimination, that might be a good method here because I can just add this second equation. X plus x gives me 2x, and then the positive y plus negative y is going to give me 0y, right? Or they just cancel. 17 and 29 gives me 46. I divide by 2 and get that x equals 23. Okay, plugging in that 23 to one of those equations. I'll do the first, I guess. So 23 plus y equals 17. I subtract 23 to both sides and get y equals negative 6. I can check my work if I add these two numbers. 23 plus negative 6 is 17. Yep. And then if I subtract 23 minus negative 6, that's going to turn to plus positive, so I get 29. All right. Moving on to our last problem here is number 9. Okay, this one you just have to really write it out. So the first sentence says 3 times one number. So 3 times one number. Okay, if we don't know, remember we can always give it a variable. Let's do n this time. Okay, so 3 times one number added to 5 times a second number. So 5 times, and then it's another number, so it's a different one though, so I can't use n again. So maybe I'll say m is or equals 68. Okay, and then I get a second equation from my next sentence. So let's look at that. Okay, 3 times the second number. Okay, remember, wait, we already talked about a second number here. We called it m. So I better do m. 3 times the second number minus 4 times the first number. The first number was the first one we talked about, which was n. Okay, so that kind of is a backwards way of saying it. But that's what we get, and it is, so it equals 6, is 6. Remember, to do elimination, you need the same variables lined up, okay? So right now, I can't do this problem as is when it comes to solving. So what you would need to do is rewrite this So I can write it as negative 4n. Let me switch colors. Okay, I could do negative 4n plus 3m equals 6. So just rewriting it. Okay, and then I've got the original equation. Okay, so if I look at my n's, those aren't ready to cancel. Same thing with the m's. Okay, they don't match. So what I want to do is, I think the n's are going to be easier to cancel out. I think I can do that by multiplying this first equation by 4 and the second equation by negative 3. Okay, so when I do that, I'm going to get these as my new equations. I'm kind of writing big. I'm running out of space, but let's do this. Okay, so I multiply every single piece. I'm going to get 12n 12n. 4 times 5m gives me plus 20m. And then 4 times 68, let's see, calculate it real fast. 68 times 4 is 272. So I get 272. You could, of course, work that out. I'm just trying to work quickly. Okay, down here, multiplying by 3 now. I'm going to distribute to each piece. So negative 3 times the negative 4n is going to give me... Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to multiply by negative 3. I was going too quickly there. Just positive 3 will be fine. Okay, so I'm multiplying the 3 to each piece because that's going to give me... Positive times a negative will give me the negative 12n that I want. Okay, and then 3 times 3m, I get plus 9m. 3 times 6, I'm going to get 18. Okay, now I have... I'm going to zoom in on this now. Now I have my two equations where the n's, I notice, are the same number, but opposites, right? One's positive, one's negative. So if I add these two equations, those cancel out. 20m plus 9m gives me 29m. And then 272 plus 18 is going to be 280, 290. I divide both by 29. I get m equals 10. So the second number is 10. And I can plug that into either of these equations to solve for n. I'll plug it into the first one. So 3n plus 5 times 10 equals 68. That's 3n plus 50. I subtract 50 from both sides. So I get 3n equals 18. Divide by 3, and I get n equals 6. Okay, so the two numbers would be 6 and 10. Alright, so I hope that this is helpful if you are trying to kind of review this and study for the test. Feel free, of course, to go back, rewatch. Remember that your test is going to be formatted in a very similar way to this, so very similar questions. The last two you will not have to solve, it'll just be setting it up, so figuring out the two equations. Alright, good luck. Thanks.